Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Principles of Information Security and Privacy 6200/8200 Firewalls, Part 2. So we're going to continue on with our talk about firewalls. In the previous videos, first of all, the reference video, we talked about a little bit about TCP/IP, how that works on a network. It was just a basic breakdown with a little bit of animation about how that works, so you can get a good idea. And then we started working into part 1 about how a basic firewall works. So from here on out, for the rest of the lecture, we're going to talk about types of firewalls, and that's going to be anything from packet filters to stateful firewalls, application firewalls. We're going to talk about some application gateways, proxies, VPNs, and a couple other things. So let's just kind of go through these a little bit. And again, we just briefly mentioned the types there on the left-hand side for the slides. On the right, we're going to talk about deployment locations. So where are firewalls deployed? Where do they go? Number one, most people are familiar with their firewall that's on their host machine. Usually, most Windows machines do have a type of firewall that you can turn on and off, and you can actually allow applications in and out. Then you have something like a network firewall. This is typically a standalone device, and when you talk about firewalls, I'm setting up a firewall in our network. I'm setting up a firewall that's going to protect our internal systems. This is what you're talking about. You're talking about a standalone piece of equipment that's connected to the internet, and it is looking at the types of communications that are coming in and out, and it has rules in place to say, okay, this type of communication is okay, and this isn't. So let's talk about the first one here, a packet filter. So this type of firewall is very basic. It's at the network layer and the transport layer. If everyone is familiar with the OSI model, it should have been in the reference video. If it's not, you can Wikipedia the OSI model. At this point, everyone should be familiar with the OSI model and how communications traverse that particular OSI model. But the firewall accepts or rejects based on a policy. It considers IP addresses, port numbers, and transport protocol types when it's communications, whether it allows those, and it only examines the packet header. So it's looking for, hey, this is a source, this is a destination, this is where this is going, this is what this is doing, and then we just move on from there. So nice little diagram here. Again, this is the OSL model here. So you have the application, the presentation sessions, and this particular firewall functions at the transport and the network layer. And so you can kind of see there that the communication between the two. There are some great videos about the OSI model and how this functions and how information traverses this. I may try to find a reference video for everyone to look at, but again, our main focus is to try to stay on point here with these individual devices in regards to firewalls, intrusion detections, and we try to stick to security and not dig too much into the networking. We just want to kind of get you the basic principles of how firewalls work and what are out there, what are the options out there, so you can at least know what someone's talking about when they start talking about firewalls. Alright, so the next type is stateful packet firewalls. They perform the same function as the previous one, but they do have some additional features. They tend to understand the communication, the sessions, or the protocols. They allow connection tracking. They can associate arriving packets with an accepted departing connection. So, for instance, case in point, you have someone on the internal network that's sending information out to a specific website. Well, that website responds, well, there is a logging of communication there. So that firewall knows that communication left the internal network, and so it's expecting that communication back from the outside. It can do deep packet and session inspection, so more powerful than packet filtering firewalls, and it does require more resources. So stateful packet firewalls is just taking those firewalls to the next level, and instead of just looking at what the source and destination is, it's actually digging a little bit deeper. All right, so let's talk about application layer firewalls. So they can filter traffic at the network, transport, and application layer. It introduces new services such as proxies. So as a result of the proxy, the firewall can potentially inspect the contents of the packets. Firewalls can be combined with other devices, intrusion prevention systems, equal firewall plus intrusion detection systems. So and we're going to dig into this a little bit deeper next week as far as the intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. But just for the sake of argument and not digging too much into it, so an intrusion detection system basically is exactly what it says. It is like an alarm system on your front door of your home. If somebody breaks in, it's going to sound an alarm, and that's pretty much it. Intrusion prevention systems actually not only are going to alarm somebody, but they're actually going to do something. So if the intrusion prevention system is seeing, a particular IP address or group of IP addresses that are attacking, then it's going to, blacklist those IP addresses and not allow them through. So application layer firewalls, a good man-in-the-middle proxy. Relay for connections in between the client and the server, mainly used at the application level. Understand specific applications, limited proxies are available. The proxy impersonates both sides of the connection, so they can allow the client and the server to talk to each other. It's very resource intensive because it is looking at applications. HTTP proxies can cache a lot of web pages, so like for instance, if someone on the internal network is attempting to go out to a specific website and it already has that information cached within the proxy, then that information is already in place and it doesn't have to reach out there for it. So let's talk about some application gateways. More appropriate TCP. It blocks all unless specifically allowed. This is something we talked about as far as blacklisting and whitelisting. Now, the ideal situation is to whitelist these things, which basically means if you whitelist something, you block everything, and then when there is communication that needs to be configured, then you will add that IP address, that communication to that gateway to allow that through. Block everything else out. Same thing when we were talking about application firewalls. Block all applications. Okay, well now we know our company needs to use YouTube. Okay, so we'll allow YouTube. All right, so our company needs to allow Facebook. Yeah, right, that's never going to happen. But if your company did need to allow it, it can block everything and whitelist the certain application that it needs. This is a whole lot better approach than sitting there and trying, because of all the new applications, because of all the new things that are constantly coming out. If you're out there trying to say, oh, well, this is a bad one, this is a bad one, and this is a bad one, I mean, you're going to be doing that forever, and your list is just going to be astronomical. It's just much easier for people that are on the network layer and your IT security analyst if you just go ahead and block everything and then start adding those things that you actually need. So keep that in mind. So when it comes to firewalls, you need to make sure that you're choosing the correct firewall. Sometimes, you don't want to choose and do overkill when it comes to firewalls. So you need to pick the right one. Is it going to be just for your host? Is it going to be a network firewall? Software or hardware firewall? Is it just going to be on your operating system? Do you actually need a physical firewall? And that's the thing, is when it comes to your company, when you're looking at it, you need to understand your company, what the culture's been, what you've had in the past, problems and issues. So when you're walking into a new environment, you really need to get a handle on the culture of, and each company has a different culture. So you need to understand that, so you can understand the needs of your network and what's expected and where the future's going. All right, so let's talk a little bit about network address translation. So this is just this is something else that firewalls can do, is network address translation. So in a lot of instances, um, obviously there's a limited number of IP version 4 addresses out there. So a lot of times what will happen is your company will have a certain number of externally facing IP addresses, and then on your internal side, in order for your people in the internal network, you will have internal IP addresses, and the network address translation will allow you to translate in between the internal systems and the outside systems. We're going to go into that a little bit better as far as an explanation is concerned. Okay, so let's talk about some advanced firewall features. And this is where the network address translation comes in. So which it allows multiple computers to share a limited number of network addresses. The service different, excuse me, such VoIP systems, inspecting packet contents. These are just some of the advanced features of firewalls. So when it comes to NAT, like I just said, IP version 4 only. It's useful if an organization does not have enough real IP addresses. So if you don't have enough addresses for everybody to be able to go out to the internet, you have 1,000 employees, but you can only afford 3 external IP addresses. I mean, I know that's a little overkill, so you'll have your internal network. Everybody will be, have an IP address on the inside, and then all that information will be translated to the outside, and everybody will be reaching out on 3 external IP addresses. Extra security measure if internal hosts do not have valid IP addresses. Harder to trick the firewall. You can use a single fixed IP address for services, which must be accessible from the outside. Think of it like this. This is most people's homes. So you purchase internet service from your ISP, and you have that service. If you go to a command line or you go to a browser and you say, what's my IP? It's going to give you an IP address. And you're going to look at that IP address and you're going to go, okay, well, when I go to a command line and I type in ipconfig or ifconfig, and you're looking at that IP address of your laptop on your inside of your house, it looks different. Well, that's the network address translation. You're looking at that as, okay, well, that's the external world sees one IP address, but my internal systems use this IP address. And this is also another feature to kind of help protect your internal systems. So basically, think of it like this. It has a many-to-one mapping. There are occasions where you have a one-to-one. If you have just one person, they have an internal IP address, and then they have an external IP address. You have a one-to-one. You have a proxies that provide a many-to-one as far as network address translating, and a NAT not required on filtering firewalls. So let's talk about encryption. So a lot of times, and I think I've briefly gone over this just a little bit, talking about the dangers of attaching to public Wi-Fi's, like airport, coffee shops, places like that, because your data, if you're using an unencrypted protocol such as Telnet or FTP, HTTP, then a lot of the traffic that you're actually using is transmitted in clear text. So this is where a virtual private network comes in place. So it allows users to access sensitive information while traversing untrusted networks. So basically, think of it like this: you are at a coffee shop, your office, or UNCC, or your home. You can set up. You have a virtual private network, which basically means is you will access the internet, sign in to a virtual private network. You're going to be logging in, and what it's going to do is when you log in from to your home or UNCC or your workplace, it's going to be encrypting that data. That data is going to be going to everything's going to be tunneled to that location. and then it's going to go back out to the internet for you to be able to access without having fear of someone sniffing your network. All right, so the DMZ, let's talk about a little bit. And again, we're just kind of hitting these just briefly. We are going to look at some of this information, especially in the hands-on activities as they're coming along. So we're just going to kind of briefly hitting them, and I may try to find another reference video to show you what a VPN really looks like. DMZ, so a simple firewall typically separates two networks. One trusted, you have the internal side, we talked about this, the corporate network, and one untrusted, which is the internet. So not all the computers in the internal network have the same duties. We need different policies. So this is like, I think we talked about this in the part 1. So you're going to have, accounting, you're going to have human resources, you're going to have all these different computers, and you're going to need to protect those resources. But at the same time, if you have a website, you want people to be able to see your web servers and access them. So you're going to have to be able to set that. This is what a demilitarized zone is. This is an area of the network of your internal systems that you allow the external world to see. So there is usually a firewall. It has 3 interfaces, the internal, the external, and the DMZ. There's a nice picture that I have. Yeah, this is just a brief, good one. So just think of it like this. So here's your internal network right here, okay, and here's the external network. So people here, they want to be able to hit your web server, but you don't want them to be able to get on your internal network. So what you'll do is you'll set up policy. You can't just leave this here and keep your web server completely open. So you don't want them. You do want some certain level of protection, but you don't want it completely wide open. Oh, let's just hit that. They'll be bringing your servers down in no time. Okay, so here's another example of how that could happen. If you have them, everybody's hitting this firewall, well, depending on if they're looking for the destination IP addresses of the web server, that information is going to be routed over to the web server. And if you're logging into the virtual private network like I was talking about before, let's say you need to access some of your internal systems, it's going to log in, it's going to see some valid credentials, it's going to allow that traffic to pass to the internal network because you have credentials and you've gone through the authentication process. So that's how that works. So a lot of these are just different variations of different setups. So firewall policies and procedures, let's talk a little bit about how that access happens. How when somebody comes from the external side or someone's coming or is on the inside and they're wanting to go out. So what allows that? How does that happen? What are these rules you keep talking about, as far in policies and that allow that kind of stuff to happen? So when a packet arrives at a firewall, a security policy is applied to determine the appropriate action. So think of it just like when you are, there's certain rules to come into your house. Okay, so let's say that you have your home and you have certain rules. Well, first of all, no one can come into your house with shoes on. Okay, that's fine. That's number 1 rule. It's the first thing. As soon as somebody gets to your door, okay, you look and see. Okay, I'm sorry, you have shoes on. I'm sorry, you can't go. And you drop them. Sorry, you can't come into my house, and you close the door. Okay, so that's the same thing. Someone tries to send you a packet of information and that has a certain feature, a certain protocol. Nope, sorry, that's in my rule set. I can't let you in, and it drops that packet. Okay, but then you're like, you know what? Anyone that's wearing socks on can come into my home because I don't want to get my floor dirty. So if someone comes to your house with socks on, okay, you can come on in. Well, that's not enough. One rule that allows people with socks on and no shoes on into the house is not good enough. Okay, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. So there's other rules that have to come in place. So all firewall rules follow a top to bottom. It'll start at the first rule, and it'll start working its way down through all the different rules until it comes to the end of the rules. So all these rules are set to ordered rules. Each rule consists of a set of tuples and an action. Alright, so this is a great example. Filter incoming and or outgoing traffic based on a predefined set of rules called firewall policies. So these are very, very important. And in my line of work and what I've discovered is that firewalls, because they're created by man, can be misconfigured and need to be audited. A lot of times firewalls have older rules that are no longer need to be in place. They need old rules need to be deleted. Rules can be redundant and actually cause problems when there's redundancies. So these things need to be audited. You can audit them quarterly or biannually, but they need to be audited to get rid of the older rules and rules that are redundant. So each firewall consists of a set of tuples and an action. Each tuple corresponds to a field in the packet. So as we were saying, each tuple. So with every firewall rule, you have a certain set that same tuples are categories. Each tuple corresponds to a field in the packet. So you can create the rule and based off of the protocol that it's communicating, the source address, the source port, the destination address, or the destination port. There are some other tuples in there as well, as far as the specific applications that you can actually filter and set up your rules on as well. There's also firewall rule tuples that can be fully specified or contain wildcards. So, any 10.1.1.star address, block that or allow that. Set up those wildcards so that you can, try to make those firewall rules as specific as possible. Alright, so there's a little example of a firewall rule. So basically here's your firewall rule right here. What is the firewall rule for? Is it TCP or UDP? This one's UDP. If it comes from this source address 190.1.1.star over any port, the destination is going to any IP address over port 80, you're going to deny all those actions. Alright, then number 2 there is any TCP protocol with 180 with the IP address beginning at 180. It can communicate over any port to any destination IP address with the 180 only over port 90. It will allow that communication, and you can kind of see how that goes on, so forth and so on. At the end of any good firewall policy, after it, think about it, as the communication goes through, any communication that does not meet the criteria here, you should have an automatic drop at the end. So you know what? I've gone through all my rules in my firewall. This communication that's coming into my network or going out of my network doesn't meet any of my criteria, then I'm going to drop it. If that happens and it is legitimate communication, I have no doubt in any way, shape, or form that user is going to be reaching out to you shortly to go, hey, I don't know why this isn't working. I'm trying to get to this. I'm trying to get this. Okay, that's very nice. I understand that you need to put in a change order, and we'll put in a firewall rule for you and get that taken care of. This is how firewalls work. You want to make them as specific as possible so you know everything that's coming in and out. And you always want to have this deny all rule at the end of your firewall policy. Alright, so this is basically what I was just talking about, how the process works. Packets pass through the firewall, their header information is sequentially compared to the fields of a rule. If a packet's header information is a subset of a rule, it is said to be a match, and the associated action to accept or reject is performed, just like what I was just saying. Otherwise, the packet is compared to the next sequential. So basically what it means is, if it doesn't meet the first rule, it'll go to the second rule, and the third rule, and the fourth rule. And as soon as it finds a match, then the action is allowed or rejected, whatever it may be. As it moves through all the rules, at the end of it, if it hasn't met any of the rules, it will reject everything, which is the way it should be. Alright, so this is starting to talk about a little bit about tuples, which we've already talked about. So set theory, accepted packets, dropped packets, unmatched packets. Sometimes these are overlapping. Are non-overlapping, excuse me. So policy optimization. So how do we make a good firewall policy? So more commonly, matches rules appear earlier. So basically, what that means is rules, things that happen all the time across your firewall network. They're always going to be like the first couple of rules in your network. Benefits are reducing the number of rule comparisons. It speeds up the process. So it basically, if the communication doesn't have to go through every single stinking rule, it'll make it faster for that communication to actually happen. It must maintain integrity of the policy. Reordering rules may change this semantic of the policy. Absolutely. If you start moving rules around and your firewall guy has set those rules in place for a certain thing, then you may have just caused absolutely chaos. These guys that are all day every day setting up rules for firewalls know what they're doing. But it's still important to always have them audited. Combining rules to form a smaller policy is better in terms of performance as well as management. If you have some very similar rules that look, you're going to allow all traffic from this side, from HR to accounting, but only FTP traffic or only telnet traffic. You can probably put that FTP and telnet traffic together, whatever that may be. All right. So we've talked a little bit about in the first video about firewalls, what they do, how they function. We started to talk about types. We've talked about stateful firewalls and proxies and application firewalls. We talked about firewall rules and how they function. Let's talk a little bit about just some open source firewalls. So it does, obviously the best firewall in my own personal opinion is Palo Alto's. They're extremely powerful technology, but they're also extremely expensive. There are some open source firewalls that you can download yourself and set up on an old laptop and set on your network at home and try to help protect yourself. So here's a couple. Linux IP tables. This is always an excellent one. OpenBSD, PF, FreeBSD, PF. This is an excellent open source firewall, and it also it has the advantage of adding in what's called Snort. Snort is an intrusion detection system. So these two go hand in hand. And again, we'll talk a little bit more intrusion detection systems in the next lecture. You can build your own firewall. All you need is a laptop or a desktop with 2 network cards, and you can download one of these open source firewalls, and you can have a firewall going at your home. Really easy to set up, and don't think that you can't do it. All you got to do is jump in it. So that's going to conclude the second part of firewalls for this week. And again, are we digging down too deep for these? No, we're just hitting what a firewall is. Talking about cryptography, talking about kind of the introduction to information security. What is authentication? What are firewalls? What are intrusion detections? What are web applications? We're not going to be able to hit these really in depth. I just want you to understand that these things exist, that they're out there, to try to help protect your developers, to help protect your network security, your networking analyst. Security is there to help protect your resources. That's why it's there. We're not going to be able to show you the end all of all IT security, but there are classes that start digging into it a little bit deeper. And if you're interested and you want to pick up one of those classes, and then it'll really start digging into the weeds for you. Otherwise, this is sort of kind of a jumping off point of where you can take a little bit of information and start digging in deeper. But as always, have a good evening, everyone, and I look forward to talking to you next week.